Live.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Alok Jain, Director and Head of Training and Capacity Building Division of Quality Council of India. I welcome you all to today's webinar on ISO 21001-2018 edition on Management System for Educational Organization. Let me take this opportunity to welcome Mr. Rajesh Maheshwari, Chief Executive Officer of NABCB, Quality Council of India, and the chair of today's webinar. Without taking much of your time, I request Mr. Maheshwari to take over. Mr. Maheshwari, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's been pleasure to present this webinar on the first ISO standard for the education sector, the ISO 21001. It's the first standard which ISO has released, the international body on this education sector. And this standard which will help all kinds of educational organizations to provide better educational services. And as you know, this webinar is being organized by the Training and Capacity Building Division of Quality Council of India. This is the newly created division of QCI, wherein all kinds of training and capacity building activities have been are being done. It started just 2 months back, and lots of activities have already, you would have known that they have already started. And this is one such activity in a series of activities that they have undertaken. So coming back to this ISO standard 21001, NABCB is one of the accreditation boards under QCI, and it's we are giving accreditation to the certification bodies which in turn certify the educational organizations management systems as per ISO 21001. So this is applicable to all kinds of, as I said, all kinds of educational organizations, help implement the management systems, help improve the efficiency and delivery of those services that they provide. And also, in turn, provides credibility to those organizations which are getting certified under NABCB accreditation for this standard. We have a very experienced speaker for informing you on the broad requirements of this standard ISO 21001. She is Mrs Arti Khosla, who is the Chief Executive of COAE International. This is one of the accredited certification bodies of NABCB. She is also the expert on the ISO TC 232, which working group 1, which was developed this standard, and as a part of BIS working group, she was involved in when the standards were getting developed. So without not taking much of time, I welcome Arti to this webinar, and also I believe that this webinar will be very useful for all the participants, for all the stakeholders, whether it is the educational organizations, their professionals working in the organizations, the teachers, the principals, the management, the trainers, the consultants, so all stakeholders, and including the learners. So implementing this standard will give a better delivery in terms of learning outcomes, and I believe that this whole webinar will be useful for all participants who are attending this webinar today. Thank you, Alok, and over to you, Arti, now.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thanks a lot. A very good evening, all of you. And I would like to begin with a big thank you to Quality Council of India for giving me this opportunity to come here and interact with you all. So as Mr. Rajesh has already mentioned, this is a very, very new standard, and it was released only in May 2018. So there is still, I would say, there's lack of awareness. And as we all know that for the whole world right now, it's a crucial time, especially for the education sector. I think especially if I talk about India, most of the participants today, I believe they are from India, and a couple of people from outside as well. So our school admissions, our entrance tests of various universities, the competitive examinations, The board examination, I think everything got held during this period. The last 2 months, nothing has happened. In fact, today in the morning, I was attending a session where the Secretary School Education, Mrs Anita Karwal, she was mentioning that for the last 2 months, about 25 crore children in India alone, they are sitting at home. They've not been able to get the regular education. So I think the whole world is facing this. It has an impact on a huge number of children. I think around 285 million young learners in India alone, and nearly almost around 1.3 billion students across 186 countries as per UNESCO. I was going through those reports and all. They've been impacted by the closures. If you look at the data of the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy's estimates, they say the unemployment has shot up from 8.4% in mid-March to almost 23% in early April. Probably a multi-pronged strategy is necessary to manage the crisis and to build a resilient Indian education system in the long term. Many schools, higher education institutions, they have initiated the innovative technology-based learning models for the effective and continued delivery of education now in the last 2 months. But I think you all will agree that education is not going to be the same business as usual. In fact, based on the guidance from the World Health Organization, the UNESCO, UNICEF, World Bank, and the World Food Programme, together they have released a framework for reopening the schools, which gives prominent attention to not only the health and protection measures, but also to standardizing our educational practices. So when we say education sector, as per the codes, we've got somewhere around 8 levels, right from the pre-primary, the early childhood education, to the tertiary level and the doctoral level. So that's the formal education. Apart from that, we have a lot of informal education organizations as well, like we have the training organizations, the vocational institutions, the coaching institutions, I think a lot to name them. So the standard that we are all going to talk about today, the ISO 21001 standard, this is applicable to all the organizations that are involved in the teaching learning using some curriculum. So I think now is the time post-COVID that all of them will have to focus more on the practices that can compensate for the lost instructional time in the last 2.5 months. They will have to strengthen the pedagogy and build on probably a hybrid learning model, such as maybe an integrated approach in the remote and distance education. So they'll have to think of the new ideas. We all know that education is only that one thing which has the potential to transform the lives, not only in one generation, but across generations. This sector is the most important of all the sectors, whether a school, a college, a university, a training institute. I think everybody, without saying, is contributing in the transformation of human beings. And to structure this sector well, it's extremely important to adopt an attitude towards systems, towards processes, towards innovation and excellence. And if India wants to be globally competitive in the manufacturing and service industry, it has to depend upon the educational system to provide that competent manpower now and also in future. Coming to the educational scenario, why I'm talking about all this is just to set up a background, how this standard came up and what this is going to help us with. The education scenario in India, it's a curious mix of the modernism as well as tradition. We have the internationally comparable IB schools, we have colleges, we have the IITs and IIMs, we have various other organizations of national and international repute, but they all coexist. They coexist with the average, and of course we have the below average institutions as well. And there is no common framework that each one of them can use to evaluate the performance of these institutions, to verify as to what degree they are able to meet the requirements of the learners, and not just the learners, but also all the other stakeholders. So I think there was a huge need to have some standard. In fact, ISO 21001 standard, I would say it's the best tool, best because it is not only talking about the quality of education, but it's also talking about the other compliances like health and safety. It's talking about risk management, information security, It's talking about sustainable practices through minimizing the impact on environment. It talks about food safety, facility management. It talks about anti-bribery, and also it talks about the business continuity. So I think this is the first standard that ISO has come up with where it has got everything. And why? Because education is the backbone. Education is the backbone of any nation. So unless we have a robust system, unless we have a robust standard which can be implemented by one and all, we cannot ensure the lifelong learning and the achievement of the learning outcomes of the learners. Let me share my slides. I hope everybody is able to see the screen. Okay, so let's talk about the standard, its principles, what is the scope and what all it covers. And broadly, I would be touching upon the requirements. What is written in the standard that an educational organization will have to comply with. So we all know the objectives of setting up an educational institution. Whenever a management thinks of setting up a new educational organization, the purpose is we want to meet the requirements of the learners. We want to utilize the resources that are available well. We want sustainable practices and a long-term success, effective systems. We want to ensure all the compliances. And of course, ultimately, we want to enhance the performance of our learners and all the other stakeholders. There are a lot of challenges. I think most of you, if it had been an open webinar, I would have asked you all questions and you would have probably given me all these answers that are written here, all those 15 points. So if we want to understand what are the broad challenges that the educational organizations face, the first one, of course, the expectations of our interested parties are ever rising. And when I say interested parties, I'm referring to everybody, a learner, an educator, the non-teaching staff, the parents, the guardians. I'm talking about the regulatory bodies. I'm talking about the affiliation boards and the accreditation bodies. I'm also talking about the government and society at large. So everybody has high expectations from the educational institutes. We need to maintain the quality of the education as well as ensure the safety of not only the learners, but also the interested parties. Adequate facilities need to be given. Standardized practices are required. If we don't have standardized practices, we typically become a person-dependent organization. As Mr. Maheshwari mentioned, it's very, very critical for the school principals, for the college principals and all. So if we have a principal who has a vision and who works with systems and all, the moment he leaves and someone else comes who is not really keen on that, the system is again back to square one. And it's very, very difficult to continuously monitor, measure, and control the performance of the institution. So I think standardized practices, as I mentioned earlier, UNESCO is also saying that you will have to now have standardized teaching practices in place. We have to ensure that our educators are competent. We have a challenge with updating our curriculum. A lot of times it so happens, you talk about schools, colleges, or even training institutions. For years and years, we continue to have the same curriculum and we don't look into the, the regular reviews of the curriculum. I always take this example in most of my sessions. If I ask you all, how many of you have been using the smartphone that you're using today? How many of you were using the same phone 5 years back? I think not more than 2 or 3 people would raise their hands. And if I ask you how many of you were using the same smartphone even 10 years back, probably somebody would come up and say, are you crazy? We want updated systems on all our appliances, all our gadgets. But unfortunately, the system, the software that is going to drive the nation, we don't update that. We still continue to teach the same things. I remember I did my master's in education, and my mother also did her master's in education 20 years before I did. So she had her material and everything available with her. And when I was doing my master's, I could refer to what all she did because the curriculum had not changed in those 20 years. It was absolutely same. So I think frequent changes are needed. We need to go on understanding not only the current needs of the learners, but also the future needs. And based on that, go on regularly updating your curriculum. We need to ensure that we are providing skill-based education. Very, very important. It's not just the rote learning that has to happen, not just the completion of a syllabus or a curriculum. We have to look at how many skills are we able to build. Ensure the compliances of all requirements. We need to reduce the attrition of the teaching as well as the non-teaching staff. Another challenge is in industry, I think people understand what is risk-based methodology, but in the education sector, we get so used to, doing so many reworks every day. In fact, we get so used to facing the same challenges every day and finding different solutions to the same problems every day. So we need to really start looking at the risk-based thinking. That's very, very important. Coming to technology, I think another challenge which most of us are already started facing, the technology needs is very frequently changing. And the schools, the colleges, the training institutions, everybody will have to adapt to it. We will have to ensure that we are updating ourselves with the changing technology. In fact, somebody was sharing with me just yesterday that now since the online teaching is happening in most of the schools and the colleges, teachers are finding it very, very difficult to get used to it because we had never done it before. And when the teacher is teaching in a class where she has got only 30 or 40 learners sitting in the class, and now we ask her to teach where the child is sitting at home, even the adults are around, the parents are around, everybody is listening to what the educator is teaching. She's so much under stress. And we as the educational institutions have probably not looked at the importance of orienting her before she goes and does this. So it's very, very important that we ensure that our teachers are prepared to adopt this. Inclusive practices. This is another very challenging area. And why I'm talking about all these challenges is because the standard has tried to answer all of this. We have tried to touch upon each and every aspect that is written here so that by adopting the standardized practices, you can take care of all these areas. Inclusive practices, when we say it's now from the government, it's mandatory. In fact, I think very recently CBSE has made it mandatory for all the schools to become inclusive schools. Inclusive, when we say, we are of course talking about the learners with the special needs. They can be the physical special needs, they can be the intellectual special needs. But we also need to understand that there are differentiated learners. Each learner, whether special or not special, has got a specific learning style. Somebody is a kinesthetic learner, somebody is an auditory learner, somebody learns in a very, very different way. So as educators, as school, as educational service providers, we need to understand that we are able to cater to the needs of all kinds of learners in our educational organization, whether it's a school or a higher education. Another important challenge is that the data of the learner and the other interested parties is probably not maintained confidentially in the schools and colleges. I think that is one challenge we all need to deal with. How are we going to ensure that the data, when I say data, it's not only the personal data, but also the performance data of the student, the marks that he's getting, all the other records that are there in the school or the college that the learner has submitted. So maintain the confidentiality of all of that. And lastly, I have put a challenge as regular monitoring of the system. So I think another area of focus is that we make a lot of policies, we make a lot of procedures. Whenever I go for an audit to a school, a college, a training institution, a university, wherever I go, I think a very big challenge is the things are in place, but then the management is not sure whether everything is being implemented or not. In fact, a bigger challenge is that even people are not aware of how many policies are existing. We make a lot of policies, but how are we ensuring the awareness? How are we ensuring a proper communication to the interested parties and a buy-in? There has to be a collaboration amongst all the stakeholders. They should all be working towards the common goal. And for that, the schools, colleges, training institutions, vocational institutions, and everybody they have to ensure that a regular monitoring of the system is being carried out, whether you call it an internal monitoring or external monitoring. But it's very, very important, very, very critical. So I think after we've discussed these challenges, probably by now you all know why we need a standard. So we need a standard because there is a critical and a continuous need for all kinds of educational organizations to evaluate the degree to which they are able to meet the requirements of their learners as well as all the other beneficiaries, all the interested parties. And they are able to continue to do so. And beneficiaries, I think we all know by now who the beneficiaries are. So this particular standard, it focuses on the specific interactions between the educational organization, the learner, the parent, the teachers, society, the regulatory bodies, and everybody. There is a specific interaction amongst all of them. And there has to be a co-creation where our traditional customer-supplier relationship, as we used to do in ISO 9001, because before 21001, that was the only standard that was available to us. In this session today, we have a lot of people who are specifically from the education sector. So probably I will not specifically refer to the other standards because though I know most of the people are from the ISO background also. So this standard is giving you guidance how to deliver quality in this challenging new environment. That's important. And I think the solution to all the 15 challenges that we just read here on my screen, the only answer is standardization. And when you say standardization, nothing else other than the ISO 21001 standard. This is the only standard. And the beauty of the standard is it has a direct linkage with the sustainability development goal number 4, goal number 10, and goal number 11. So ISO, I'm sure you all are aware, ISO had a task to map all their standards with the sustainability development goals. And goal number 4, that is quality education, is a very, very critical goal for ISO 21001. This is, of course, the first international management system standard. Before this standard, I think ISO had not published a requirement standard. In fact, very long back, I don't remember the year, ISO had come up with a guidance standard on the implementation of ISO 9001 that used to be known as IWA2, International Workshop Agreement 2. That had got a lot of requirements for the educational organization. Since then, I think this is the first time ISO has come up with a requirement standard. It was prepared by the ISO project committee called as PC288, and now this is being managed by TC232. BIS adopted in January 2019. So this is a common management tool. A common management tool that's available to all educational organizations regardless of their type and size. So a small school with just 500 children can implement it. A big old 40-year-old school with 6,000 children can implement it. A university with the undergraduate programs, postgraduate programs, and doctoral degrees can implement it. A very new higher education institute that has just launched a new program can implement it. So anybody who is involved with the teaching learning practices using a particular curriculum will be able to implement and get certified for this standard. The scope, if you want to know, I think broadly, I would say, although I've already mentioned any educational organization, but still, if you want to know, it's ECE. And ECE, as per the ISCED framework, is also divided into 2 parts. It's the early childhood education and it's the pre-primary education. So we need to understand that categorization and the framework also. Then you have school education, you have higher, you have the L&D institutions. Now L&D institutions also, you have got some very specific training institutions who are just directly delivering training to anybody outside. And then you have the L&D verticals under various corporates and PSUs also. So very recently, we have certified an L&D vertical of a public bank in UAE. So this vertical is providing trainings only to the employees of this bank. So any kind of an L&D institution, any kind of a vocational or a coaching institution. So even a very small preschool, just maybe in my vicinity, they've opened it, and a very big university in some other country, anybody can implement it. Okay, so the main purpose is to is to streamline your organizational culture in line with your principles, your policies, and your objectives, so that you are able to achieve the mission and the vision that you've set for yourself. That is the EOMS strategy. EOMS, when I say EOMS, is the Management Systems for Educational Organizations. I did not speak much about ISO. I just thinking that probably people would have gone through it. But I think for the ones who are only from the education sector, let me just quickly give you a brief in 5 seconds. So ISO is probably the oldest organization in the whole world that creates the standards, publishes the standards, and maintains those standards. And there are various technical committees that take care of those standards. So ISO has got probably more than 1,000 standards. And for the education sector, this is the only one standard. Okay. Coming to the principles for an EOMS, there are total 11 principles. Yeah, just 1 second. I think something wrong. Okay, there are total 11 principles of the standard. These are not the requirements. These are just the principles. So requirements are different. Requirements are the clauses of the standard. I'm going to talk about them also very quickly. Right now, I'm only referring to the principles of ISO. The first principle being the learner focus. Instead of explaining or giving you some wisdom on what this principle is about, I would try and give you some real life examples. I will try to do that. So talking about learner focus, I'll give you an example. I was associated with a government training institute long back, I think about 12, 13 years back. I saw this organization, and now I asked them, just a couple of days back, I called up them and I asked them, what are you doing now? You are providing the trainings. Now with COVID-19, how are you going to manage that? And a very beautiful answer this team gave me. They said, we are only trying to understand what are the current and the future needs of the learners, the trainees who are coming to us. We are trying to understand what industry wants, because ultimately they are going to be absorbed in the industry. We are trying to link our objectives to the needs of the learners and the industry. And accordingly, we are trying to review our curriculum, because we want to plan, design, deliver, and assess the learning as per the needs. And now we are trying to offer the trainings using different modalities. We are trying to make some videos because we want to put them up on YouTube, and also that our trainees, they can refer to it wherever they are, and they can just come online for an assessment. We are trying to make e-learning and e-content, and we are also trying to train our trainers so that they can understand what is the learner-centered learning. So I think when they explained all this to me, I was totally convinced that it's a learner-focused organization. So this is what we have to do. Coming to the second principle, that's called as visionary leadership. Till about, I think, 4 years back, it used to be leadership. Now ISO calls it visionary leadership, because every leader has to have a vision, and he needs to understand how he's going to achieve his vision. I'll give you another example. We certified a department of a university in Middle East, and my auditors, the kind of feedback they shared with me when they came back, they said that the guy who is the CEO of this department of the university, he has very well communicated the mission, vision, and his policy and strategy to everyone throughout his university. The leaders at all the levels, they are positive examples to people. People are acting with accountability because the CEO has given them a lot of authority. He's given them all the resources that are needed. People have been trained well to do the task. And he recognizes everyone's contribution, and he encourages them to do better every time. And the best thing that my team observed about the CEO was that he's highly competent to manage changes. I think if all this a leader is able to do, he's probably a visionary leader. Coming to the third principle, that's engagement of people. I'll again talk about a school that we've certified in Bangalore. It's a Cambridge school. I have myself observed the kind of engagement in the school. They have got a lot of small teams made. Why I'm sharing these examples with you all is because everybody who's attending this session, probably you would want to go back and implement the standard. You get a lot of ideas. You know the how part of it. The what part is written in the standard. You read and you understand what all you have to do. But how you go about it is what I'm trying to share. So in this school, they have got small teams to take care of everything. There is a lot of collaboration amongst the entire staff. A lot of knowledge sharing happens. Open discussions happen. Everybody in that school, all the teaching and the non-teaching staff members, they've been asked to set up a personal objective and carry out a self-evaluation against this objective. I think that itself is a very, very good example of engagement of people where everybody is involved towards the achievement of the vision and mission of the school. They can relate with it. Coming to the fourth principle, that is process approach. Process approach is where you want to achieve your objectives effectively. And at the same time, you have to manage your risks. You have to establish the authorities and responsibilities for the people who are going to manage the activities. And you want to determine the process interdependencies. Very, very important. We understand the organization's capabilities and provide the resources so that you are able to manage these processes. The fifth principle talks about improvement. I think any organization that is successful, they have an ongoing focus on improvement. Around 18 years back, I got an opportunity to work very closely with a very dynamic secretary in the government of India. She used to conduct regular trainings for all the people in the ministry. She used to herself tell them how to apply the basic tools and methodologies for improvement objectives. She used to implement and complete her improvement projects. Now I think most of us across the world, we have the data-driven approach almost everywhere. But at that time, I'm talking about 18 years back, she herself used to every second day sit with her team to track and review how the planning is happening, whether implementation has happened or not, whether the results of her improvement projects are being achieved or not. If not, how much is the pending task to be done? I think from this IAS officer, I learned that improvement can never be achieved unless you treat it as a project. So I think my only guidance on this is treat your improvement task as a project. The sixth principle is evidence-based decisions, where it is very, very important, whatever decisions in our educational organizations we take, they need to be based on the facts, the evidences, and data analysis. If we want our decisions to have lasting consequences on the learners and the society, and also we want to eliminate that element of uncertainty of whether my decision is going to be right or not, I think that is very, very important that you regularly monitor the key performance indicators, make accurate and reliable data available, and combine all these evidences, probably with your experience, with your intuition, and then take decisions. That is evidence-based decisions. The seventh principle talks about relationship management, where you need to ensure that with all your interested parties, the organization has the everlasting relations. The impact on the performance of your educational organization with a common understanding of objectives and values, all your interested parties need to have that. You need to probably balance your short-term gains with long-term considerations. Gather and share the resources, your expertise, and all the information that you have with all your interested parties. That is how you maintain your relations. The eighth principle talks about social responsibility. The next four principles that I'm going to talk about, they've been included only in ISO 21001 standard. So that means only for the educational organizations. This principle is very, very important for the sustainability of the educational organization and for ensuring the long-term success. I'll give you an example. We recently went to a school in UAE. Their strategy, their business strategy, it includes the ways how they are going to apply the social responsibility, how they are going to raise awareness on that. They have written means they've properly documented what kind of behavior is expected from everybody in the school to implement principles and values in all their operations so that they take into account the social responsibility. Whether they are conducting a small event or maybe an activity, how are they going to efficiently use their resources with least impact on the environment? That is the motto of the school. I think that's a good example of social responsibility. The ninth principle talks about access and equity. I think I've already said about the special needs. That is what you need to look at. Ensure that everybody who has any special needs, they have the equal access to the learning facilities, the learning resources, and the learning material. You need to provide all the support in terms of the cultural, the linguistic, the psychological, and the educational requirements of all your learners. So you have to be inclusive. That is access and equity. The 10th principle is about ethical conduct. I did mention about the anti-bribery. That has been considered here. So you can take a clue from the standard that's called as ISO 37001 standard anti-bribery management system. So make an ethical conduct policy in your school, maintain integrity of your research and results, your policies, and if somebody breaks the ethical conduct rules, what is going to be the impact? So do all of that. And the last principle is talking about data security and protection. I think I've already said about that too. So your interested parties need to have full confidence that their data is going to be maintained by your educational institution with full care and confidentiality. Put up your data security policy in place. Have multi-stage backup systems. Have recovery systems. Educate your learners and your staff on data privacy and security. Maybe the potential threats you can identify and make mitigation plans. Very, very important, very, very vertical. Okay. Yeah, just a second. Alok, are you able to see my presentation? Alok,
yes, we can see it. Please go ahead.
You're able to see my presentation?
Yeah, we are able to see.
Or somehow.
You can, just make it full screen.
Yeah, I don't know. This is somehow not visible. Just 1 second. Oh, I don't know what has gone wrong. I'm not able to see my presentation somehow suddenly. Yeah, now this is okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, so after the principles, I think I would like to, I would skip the benefits of ISO 21001. I think you all have understood that is what I tried to touch upon when I was talking about the principles. So if you're able to implement those principles in your practices, these are the benefits you're going to get. Your credibility improves, the learners, the learners' trust in your educational organization processes improves, your interested party satisfaction increases, and you are stimulating a culture of excellence and innovation. This is the broad structure of the standard. There are 10 clauses, and this is the same high-level structure which is followed by all the other ISO standards. So, but the beauty of this standard is that a lot of guidance has also been given along with the clauses. So there are these 7 annexures that you all see here that are giving you specific information on the additional requirements for the early childhood education, on the principles, on classification of interested parties, on communication strategies. So they've given you very nice mapping if you all go through that. The standard is available. I think everybody can purchase the standard from BIS. It's hardly probably less than 500 bucks. So get the standard, go through these guidances. And once you read this, you will understand what exactly you're supposed to do. Beautiful guidance given in the standard. They've also told you what all processes typically existed in educational organizations. How can you measure it? How can you improve it? And if you want to map this standard with some other standard, maybe a regional or national standard. I'll give you an example. If you are a NAC accredited educational organization, so with all the NAC requirements, you can map the ISO 21001. If you are an ABIT, American Board of Accreditation, you can map it with the ISO 21001. You have the CBSE bylaws, you have the Cambridge bylaws. You have any other school accreditation standard or any other standard, it's very, very easy to map this standard with any other. And the last annexure is giving you a lot of guidance on the health and safety considerations for the educational organizations. These clauses, let me try to quickly touch upon the clauses. This session is just to give you an overview about the standard. So probably it's not possible in a 1-hour session to talk about each and every clause in a detailed manner, but I'm just going to quickly touch upon it. And after that, if you have any questions, I think you can take up your questions. We will have a quick question answer round as well. Clause number 4, that's the basic, I think, that this clause says. When I say it says means the requirements have been specified. So this particular clause says that the organization will have to identify all the issues, whether internal or external, whether positive issues or negative issues. So probably carry out a SWOT analysis of your organization to begin with. Put your strategic planning in place. Your vision and mission need to be aligned with your strategic direction. Your interested parties and their requirements, that needs to be determined. And determine all your processes and their interactions. So you should know what are the inputs, what are the activities, what is the desired outcome or the output, and what are the possible controls and the checkpoints through which you'll be able to monitor and measure the performance of your processes. This is typically the process approach. Clause number 5 is typically talking about the leadership, which says that you need to make sure that you are accountable. The integration of the EOMS with your business processes is ensured. That means you don't have two parallel systems. One your educational organization system, another your ISO system. It shouldn't happen like that. The requirements of the standard needs to be integrated with your business processes. You need to support all the leaders at various levels. So when I say leader, I'm not just referring to the CEO of a school or CEO of a college. I'm also referring to the principal, the vice principal, the headmistress, the coordinators, the supervisors, and also the faculty. I always say every educator is a leader because he or she is leading a team of around 30 to 40 learners in a class. He or she has to guide all those learners. So everybody in an educational institution is a leader. So ensure that your policy is in place and the roles, responsibilities, and authorities of all the key people, they are determined. Clause number 6 is typically talking about your risk assessment. You need to put your actions in place to address the risks and opportunities. Have your measurable goals in place. We call them objectives in ISO. So put your objectives in place and make a plan, make an action plan to achieve those objectives. Who will achieve it? How will you achieve it? By when are you supposed to do it? How are you going to evaluate the results of the achievement of your objectives? So complete action plan with measurable objectives. This is what this clause says. And how are you going to plan the changes? And when you are planning changes in your educational institution, how would you ensure that the integrity of the EOMS doesn't get impacted, right? Ensure that all the resources are provided. Talking about resources under clause number 7. Clause number 7 is talking about all the resources that you need. And when I say all the resources, it includes your infrastructure, your work environment, your human resources. And human resources does not only include your full-time staff. It also includes the volunteers, the interns, and the external providers who are associated with you. Your recruitment criteria needs to be properly determined. It needs to be transparently shared with all the interested parties. Your infrastructure, that includes everything. The standard says your building, your playgrounds, your equipments, the utilities. Ensure that they are all safely maintained. There has to be provision for self-learning, for rest, for recreation. Your indoor, outdoor, the physical environment, including the temperature, the heat, noise, and how ergonomic is your all the equipments that you're using, the furniture. I always give a very relevant example here. You go to a pre-primary school, the early childhood school. You want very small, the furniture with very short height. Even your, the hand wash area and all your sports equipments, everything should be at a very, very low height where these children can reach out. You go higher up for grade 11 and 12, you need one chair and one desk for every child. And the height has to be maintained accordingly. So ergonomics is very, very important area here. And the psychosocial factors. It says the physical factors as well as the psychosocial factors. When I'm talking about this, I'm talking about the staff. The staff has to be able to maintain the work-family conflicts, the balance, the stress, the burnouts, have some reward policies, recognize their efforts, have a clarity in their roles. There should not be any ambiguity in what they are supposed to deliver. So very, very clear terms. You should be able to verify, you should be able to validate that you are able to conform to the products and services and maintain the organizational knowledge. Now here what I'm referring to is, probably the most experienced resources of the educational institution. They know everything about the educational institution, but the moment they leave, they create a big void. People don't know what to do next because there is no exchange of the intellectual property happening. Very recently, I was listening to the speech of a VC of a very renowned university. He was getting retired. And in his last speech, he said, the most difficult task that I see is I have created a lot of standards in all these years, but it's very difficult to make people understand and implement it because all those standards are here. They are in my head. They are not on a paper. So it's very, very important, very critical in an educational institution. Whatever you learn, your project learnings, your failures, wherever you're learning something, the best practices that you see, you need to come back and share it with the others so that the educational institution gets the benefit of it. People in your educational institution need to be fully aware on the policy, the strategy, the objectives, and how they are contributing to the effectiveness. And if they don't contribute to the effectiveness of the EOMS, what is going to be the impact? They should be very well aware of it. Maybe through your regular meetings, you do that. You have various orientation sessions for them. You do it through trainings, whatever, but it's very important. Your communication process has to be in place and why you want to communicate. How are going to be the communication arrangements? I told you there is an annexure on communication. If you go through that, a very nicely drafted table you will see, which shows you whether you are communicating for a purpose to inform something, or you want to consult with your interested party, or you are just checking something, maybe with your competitor. You want to see what the college that is next to me is offering better than me. So you are not communicating for something else. The main purpose is you want to check how they are performing. So there are various purposes why we communicate and how we communicate. What is going to be the impact of the communication? I always say it's very, very critical when something is going on social media, a small news, a small piece of information about your educational institution going outside, be very sure, be doubly sure about what you're putting up there. Even a small miscommunication or even a small error in your communication is going to have a huge impact on the educational organization. And the last subclause under clause number 7 is about controlling the documented information. Our educational institutions have huge documentation, huge. You have the learners' work, you have the teachers' research, your faculty is carrying out a lot of research. You don't know how much documentation you have. But how do you ensure that your documentation is identifiable, it is retrievable, wherever you need it, it's available, and how are you going to maintain and how are you going to ensure the control over that? That is what clause number 7 talks about. And clause number 8 is talking about your core operations. That is your teaching and learning, where you have to ensure the implementation of the principle of accessibility and equity. You should be very, very clear with what are going to be the learning outcomes. Then your SEN, your special education needs, maybe you will have to do the adaptive instruction or maybe individually tailored measures. The standard says have individually made learning plans for each child. I don't know if you've heard that saying. A child tells the educator, teacher, if I don't understand the way you teach me, Please teach me the way I understand. So I think the standard is telling all the educational organizations to understand the needs of the learners and prepare individually tailored measures to do that. Your linkages to the workplace opportunities, and in case you are providing meals in the school, ensure that they are healthy, nutritious, and all of that. Understand the current and future needs, analyze the abilities, the health and safety requirements, that is very, very important, and the disorders of probably writing, reading, maths, auditive, visual, motor impairment, giftedness, intellectual ability, all of that. And how well your teachers are trained to identify that. Very important. I think special needs play a major role at the school level. As you grow higher up in the education system, I think the role becomes little lesser, because it's very, very critical and very important that at a very early stage, you are able to identify these special needs. I'll give you a quick example. I hope the time permits. So we were carrying out an audit in the school. I'm talking about almost around, I think, eight years back. It was a residential school in Rajasthan in India. And the residential schools generally start from grade 3. So when we were on a round, we were doing the audit, I just observed a child who was fidgeting with his stuff and he's not paying attention in the class. A grade 3 child, a very small child. And the teacher is teaching the other children and she's trying to engage everyone. Now, when I asked her why this child is aloof, she said, he's a slow learner. I said, what do you mean by that? She said, no, whatever you do, he doesn't respond, he doesn't understand. Probably he's not interested in studies. I spoke to the principal about it, and we were there in the school for around 3 days, and all 3 days I noticed this child and the same pattern of behavior. So the principal said, okay, I'll speak to the parents. I said, I would just give you an advice, try to at least carry out a clinical diagnosis of the child. She spoke to the parents, and the parents were not ready to accept that there is a problem with the child. So that is why they have put him in a residential school, so that they can proudly say my child is studying in a residential school. And when we came back after the audit, after about 1 month, the principal gave me a call and she said, I really thank you for bringing that to our notice. When we got the clinical diagnosis done, we got to know that the child is half deaf. He is not able to hear. And imagine, when a learner doesn't hear what you're saying, how do you expect him to react to what you're saying? He cannot respond at all. So it's very, very critical. That is why we have put it in the standard here. Then we come to the design and development of the curriculum. How well you design your curriculum, what are the prerequisites, and how do you plan your education methods, your various activities that you're going to adopt in your college, in your training institution. So you should know the learning outcomes. And another very, very critical area here is the assessment. So we want to assess the learning of the child or the learner at the college level, at the L&D level. When you want to assess, you should be very clear on what you want to achieve. So your assessment blueprint has to have a direct linkage with your learning outcomes. If you're not able to do that, you cannot achieve what you want to achieve. That's important. Coming to the admissions, whatever you claim in your prospectus, your pre-admission information that you're providing to the interested parties, you should be able to meet all those claims. And make it very, very clear what's going to be the role of the educational institution, the role of the learner, the role of the guardian, if there's something, because these days, most of the schools, colleges, you would hear them complaining that there is no collaboration, no participation from the parents' side. So be clear on that. Make it known to them well in advance that this is what you expect them to do, okay? Coming to the ethical conduct in your assessments, you should have methods to detect the plagiarism. A lot of times you want to print the magazine of your institution and your learners come up with beautiful articles and creatives and everything, but you don't know whether it is their own work or someone else's work that they've copied. These days, a lot of stuff is available on Google. So you should have methods to detect the plagiarism. That is what the standard says. And if a learner wants to appeal against the grades or the marks that you assign to him, give him a proper opportunity to raise that appeal and respond to it. All right. And another important clause is on knowing how satisfied your interested parties are. You should have a mechanism in place where you are regularly able to monitor the satisfaction of learners and all the other interested parties. So clause number 9 is about your evaluation. You carry out an internal audit, you take the feedback from your learners and beneficiaries and everybody, handle your complaints well. And when I say complaints, complaints are a very, very important non-conformity. So whenever you have any non-conformities, how you deal with them, go to the root cause of it. Find out the proper solution to it, not just correcting it, but to find out a corrective action so that the same problem doesn't get repeated in future. That's how you need to handle all your complaints, your appeals and everything. Okay, conduct internal audit, conduct regular management review meetings. And clause 10 says that you need to ensure that there is improvement happening. After you're able to eliminate the causes of the non-conformities and you're able to improve the suitability and effectiveness of your system, it has to be a continuous process. In case there are any sudden changes like this one, I think this pandemic has given a very, very good lesson to everyone. We need to be prepared. We need to be prepared to face all kinds of situations. And I think there are very few educational organizations who have been able to seamlessly transition from the classroom teaching to virtual teaching. Very, very few, because our systems are not in place. Then your methods to innovate and reorganize, all this is very, very critical, very critical. So the continual improvement can happen only through a regular monitoring, through proper corrective measures, and through data analysis and evaluation. I think data analysis plays a major role. Even if I'm saying you need to identify your interested parties, I say you need to identify your risk, establish your objectives, whatever is written in the standard, do it with the data-driven approach. This is all data, but the data has to be adequate. It has to be proper. It has to be correct so that it can be used by the relevant users to analyze and see what kind of an improvement is needed so that they can take effective actions. And please remember, the quality not achieved is the quality denied to the learner. And we have no right to deny the quality to the learner. And I would just say, I have tried to quickly touch upon the clauses. I would just say that education is that one sector where the end result is not a product. It is not a commodity. It's a human being. It's a human being who is not only knowledgeable, competent, and skilled, but is also, he's supposed to be socially responsible, morally correct, and an emotionally strong person who has to have values and a belief system. Thus, I think my only submission today in this session, before I end my talk, is that the EOMS standard has a huge potential to transform the education system, and as a result, have a great impact on the society at large. So it's our moral responsibility to ensure that the implementation and certification of this management system does not get diluted at any level at any cost. In this time of crisis, I think a well-rounded and an effective educational practice is what is needed for the capacity building of the young minds. So it will develop skills that will drive their employability, that will drive their productivity, their health, and their well-being in the decades to come, and ensure the overall progress of all the nations. That's it. Thank you very much. Over to you, Rajesh. Let me know if there are any questions that you want me to answer.
If you can just also Arti, you can quickly tell about the certification process and how much time is required for any educational organization to prepare and then go in for certification. That would be of help to the participants for this webinar. There is one question already raised by participant from Mahindra & Mahindra.
I would do that. Thank you. So to tell you that, I think the time that you need to prepare yourself would totally depend on the kind of systems you have at present. carry out a gap analysis vis-a-vis the requirements of the standard, and you will be able to know what all you need to do to be able to comply with the standard. Once you are ready with that, I think in the ideal scenario, if the organization has been able to do well, probably in just 3 to 4 months time, the organization is ready to apply for the certification. The moment you apply for the certification, we carry out the stage 1 audit, where we typically verify the documentation and your preparedness for the stage 2. And the stage 2 audit is the implementation check, where we visit you, we talk to all the people, we go around, we look at your processes, the operations, the satisfaction of your interested parties and everything else. We need to see the compliances to the standard. And once all that is in place, in case there are any gaps, we let you know those gaps and you again work on that. We allow you some time to work on that. So I think right from the stage 1 audit to stage 2 audit, if with your cooperation and your proactiveness, we get all of that, probably in just 2 to 3 months time, we are able to certify any organization, any good organization that has systems in place. Have I been able to answer the question?
Yes, and there is one more question. If any of the requirement is not applicable, like for curriculum development, so how does the EOMS, the educational organization, will have to respond to that?
So Rajesh, when we were discussing at the ISO in our last meeting in Europe, we had this meeting in September. We had people from almost 100 different countries. This is one area on which we deliberated a lot. And we came up with a common understanding that though the ISO standard allows the exclusions of the clauses, you can give a justification towards that. But at the same time, if an organization says it does not design and develop any educational product or service, I think it's not acceptable. Even if you're taking these curriculum typically from CBSE or your NAC guidelines or NCRT or whatever, still there are so many, I would say, the assessment tools you design, your activities you design, your CCA, and there are so many things within the curriculum. Curriculum is a very broad word, I would say. So you develop your own academic plans and your non-academic plans. So there is little bit of design and development definitely involved, where you keep in mind the needs of the learners. Can I quickly give you an example? So we went to one school. The school is in Punjab.
Yeah. There is just. Yeah, the question again is regarding clause 8.3 in case of schools following any board curriculum. Yeah. So can this clause be excluded while implementing the standard in the educational organization?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If they are able to justify the exclusion as a certification body, we will be okay with it. But the school has to introspect whether they should actually be excluding it. If they say they don't do any design and development, that means they are only applying a curriculum which is applicable to everybody across the country. That means the regional requirements, the interested party requirements, nothing is being considered by the school or the college in redefining things. So little bit of design and development is happening everywhere. That is what I'm trying to say. But if you all want to exclude it, you have to justify that. Justify and convince the auditors.
Many questions were raised on whether this standard is applicable to what kinds of institutions, whether for colleges, accredited colleges, universities. I think you clarified this in the presentation, but if you can again clarify. So if you can again clarify for university level or higher learning, whatever, so if that will be helpful to the other participants.
I think I've also given you some examples. So in the last probably 8-9 months since the time we have the accreditation from NABCB, we have certified the CBSE school, we have certified the Cambridge board schools, we have certified the department under a university that is a public university, a government university in the Middle East. We have certified the L&D vertical of a service sector organization in UAE. So I think anybody that's involved with the teaching learning, somebody is from Mahindra and Mahindra also. So they have their own training institution for their own employees. So that training vertical can very well be certified. Everybody, right from a preschool to the university level and L&D and vocational and coaching, a driving school, I would say a cultural school that is teaching culture, or maybe a yoga school. So anybody that's using a specific curriculum to teach can implement it, can be certified. That is why I say the standard has a potential to transform the country.
Yeah, I agree. Because this is a generic standard and which can be applied across institutions.
Yes.
So it was a wonderful session, Arti, and I suppose the participants would benefit from this session which you have undertaken, and it's time to close. We are already 5 minutes above our scheduled time. And if there are any more queries, you can always reach out to the training division of QCI or to NABCB, and we will help you provide your respond to your respective queries. Thank you all, and we need to close. Alok, if there are any formalities to be done, maybe you can do that.
To thank Ms. Arti and Mr. Rajesh Maheshwari. Thank you very much for the nice session. And it's a new topic, although it's a new topic, but it was really wonderful. We got a lot of questions in the chat box, and we'll get back to the participants with their queries. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you so much, Alok. Thank you so much. All right.